All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being guinea pigs tonight. I think with Ryan's help, we kind of got it sorted out. I got people populating the meeting on Zoom. Uh, so thank you for coming tonight. I was going to introduce our speakers, uh, Kevin Hunting and John McNerney, but I dropped my cheat sheet notes and they're under the table. So let's just say that Kevin is associated with the American Kestrel Partnership program. You know, representing, I guess, California. He attends meetings, that sort of thing. So he is very involved and committed to this project. John is the city's wildlife resources manager. He's the mediator between people and wildlife within the city limits. But this project, he's representing the city and this conservation effort for the American Kestrels with the nest boxes within the city limits. So after all we went through tonight, why don't I stop talking and I'll give the floor to our speakers and they can tell you some good stuff.
Thanks, Ken. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Unmute yourself on that so they can. Okay, this is going to be. Hey, all right, thank you. All right. So again, for those of you who maybe didn't hear, my name is John McNerney. I work for the city of Davis as a wildlife resource specialist. So I'm a wildlife biologist employed by the city for many years now. I've been with the city about 23 years. And the city, if you're familiar with City Davis has always had an interest and commitment in resource conservation, in particular wildlife and habitats. They are unique in the sense that they hire staff biologists to help run their wildlife programs here. The job's morphed over the years, but it's always kind of based on connecting people with wildlife and habitats, but also trying to assist wildlife and through the acquisition and the restoration of habitats and these sorts of things. So when I was, Kevin and I are good friends, and Kevin and I were talking over a beer one evening, I think, and said, hey, I'm really interested in helping do my part in bolstering the kestrel population. Here's some data. He actually downloaded a bunch of a lot of research papers about the decline of the kestrel, and went through, and he got me excited about it too. He's like, let's go put some kestrel boxes up. So next thing you know, we're in my garage building kestrel boxes, looking at all the city properties that we have, not just in city limits, but also outside. So the city owns a bunch of agricultural easements or has either fee title or through easement, some sort of access to the lands that are in our planning area. So that's kind of where this took off. So today we're going to kind of go through what it is we're doing. And I think the first Okay.
Yeah, take the cursor off of that. That was what
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
detecting
Yeah,
for.
so yeah.
Okay, we're good. Thanks, guys. Okay, so why are we doing this? Why did Kevin come in and say, hey, what can we do to make things better? Well, no, it's open now. So there's been declines in North America, but also in California. This is some of the data through the American Kestrel Partnership, and Kevin will go into more detail about this in a little bit. But generally, the red on this map of North America, or at least the United States and Canada, red is decline, yellow is moderate decline, green is actually increase, but you can see it's a lot of red and yellow up there. Here's the Coastal California Breeding Bird Survey. You can see the trend line is on its way down since they started kind of monitoring that back in 1968. And it's still continuing, maybe not as a dramatic decline, but it's still on its way down. So why are American Kestrels declining? Well, there's a lot of reasons. And again, Kevin will jump into more detail later. But habitat loss and fragmentation is always assumed to be the primary culprit for a lot of declining wildlife species. So certainly the case with American Kestrel. Changing, like a change in predator dynamics. So different critters that want to eat kestrels are they could be on the increase. For example, Cooper's hawk is a pretty significant predator of American Kestrel, and as we see Cooper's hawks do better in the landscape, especially in urban areas, we can expect to see higher predation rates on their prey species. Pesticides and pollutants are always a complication. Certainly, they're seeing that as a possible issue with kestrel declines. Collision mortality, so that's mostly vehicle collision, especially out on the interstates where interesting little bugs get clipped by a truck or a car and they're bouncing around and the kestrel comes down for an easy meal and they become the next victim. That's a big problem for not just kestrels, but for lots of different birds of prey. Climate change, that's obviously happening. We're seeing extreme weather events that could be also contributing to why they're on the way down. And there's probably other factors there that need to be discovered and tested and help to answer those questions. The American Kestrel Partnership is a project of the Peregrine Fund. This graphic here shows where all of the different participating volunteers, partners, if you will, in the program, who have boxes up and are actively monitoring them. In California, there's over 100 different sites, I believe, not necessarily boxes. There's probably way more than 100 boxes, but certainly 100 different people participating in the partnership. And there's thousands nationwide. And so why, when we're talking about kestrel decline, why are kestrel nest boxes so important? Well, they're kind of that limiting factor, right? This is a cavity nesting species. They need to have these cavities as an important fundamental element in their reproduction. Kestrel boxes can also help, if we put them up, we're creating habitat, but we're also gaining access to these kestrels for research, for study, to find out more about, it could be even like what sort of chemicals are in the body if we start drawing blood and taking a look at that, what sort of diseases are getting them. Maybe there's other environmental factors that are preventing their eggs from even coming to maturation. There's some researchers in the room here who take a look at metals in the environment and how they might impact embryo development and that sort of thing. And it's really just adding to the growing body of science. We want to answer these questions. Why are they declining? What can we do to stop that trajectory? And then education. So, coming to community groups, to Audubon, to anybody who's really interested in these birds as a species, to want to come out and help and engage and learn more about them and what they can do to help. So siting of the nest boxes, this is, when Kevin and I were building these boxes, we were like, well, let's make 10 of them and we'll go put them up, and we weren't exactly sure where to put them. we consulted the literature and decided to place these boxes. Actually, I stand corrected. We put up 11 boxes. You know, naturally, I was interested if I was going to be part of this, if the city of Davis was going to get behind supporting this project. It was easy, low-hanging fruit for me to gain access to city properties. So most of those 11 boxes went up on city properties, and I believe one is on city of Davis properties, and one of them is up on the city of Woodland. Forget what it's called there, but it's the regional park that they have just south of the city off of pole line. We, like I said, we built several of them, but we also purchased a few, just kind of test different makes and models, if you will, to see if anything was better than the other. One design was better than the other. We put them up about a year ago, so this was 2023 is the first year we put them up and began to monitor them. Deciding where to put them aside from city properties, we wanted to take a look at why, you know, or what is kestrel habitat? What are they keying into when they're looking to set up a breeding territory? So we used a lot of historic kestrel sighting data from eBird, you know, Christmas bird count, just local knowledge, you know, friends and ourselves just driving around the areas. Where have we seen kestrels? And we went to take a look at those areas, find out if there was a good spot to put up these boxes. We tried to get a scattering of different habitat types, near bodies of water, near open areas, some with greater urban influence or at least anthropomorphic disturbances, some that are very quiet and off the beaten path, if you will. Yeah, and then just put them out there and see what happens, see what kind of occupancy we would come up with. Most of the city properties ended up being these transitional agricultural areas, so between human uses and agricultural uses. Davis Wetlands is an example of one of those sites. The old wastewater treatment plant, if you're familiar with that, it's right off a pole line, kind of where the go-kart track is, and there's a paintball facility out there, as well as the big solar panel. I mentioned before the Woodland Regional Park, South Fork Preserve, another city property down south of town off of Base Boulevard, and then the treatment plant are synonymous. This is actually, sorry, what you see on this graphic or on this slide here, the old wastewater treatment plant, that's actually the new or existing wastewater treatment plant. Apologies for that. The old Davis landfill site is where the old wastewater treatment facility was. So anyway, that just kind of helps you get an understanding of the sites of where we put these boxes. Once we got to the site, we kind of looked around first and was like, well, where do we stick these things? You know, we got a box, we know it's got to be above the ground. Are there trees? Some instances there were trees right on the edge of like agriculture looking out, and we attached the box to the tree, real simple. Some areas, no trees. So what do we do? Hey, well, there's an old utility pole. That's a great place to put it. PG&E is not going to yell at us because it's abandoned. We'll just stick it up there. It'll be fine. And it has been so far. No one's come back to us and said, no, you got to take it off. And then at least in one instance, we buried our own pole, like an old repurposed sign pole from the Public Works Transportation, courtesy of Public Works Transportation Division. And we just fastened it to that pole as you would any sign with a little U-shaped bolt around the front and the back side. We put these boxes up in early March. We oriented them mostly north-northwest. There's some reason behind that. Kevin might, I think the literature suggests that's the best direction to place them. Plus, I think it's a little more sheltered from prevailing winds, especially during extreme weather events. It just basically the water doesn't come blowing in through the front door. And they were generally placed about 8 to 12 feet up in these on these structures that we were attaching them to. So what did we see in 2023, our first effort here? Well, we had one occupied nest out of the 10, 4 successful fledglings out of that one, and then 1 egg that did not mature, was non-viable. And that's going to be part of a research question moving forward, is perhaps why did that one not make it? You know, so we may look at the chemical composition of those moving forward, but for the time being, we were so excited to have an occupied box and young, we went with that. So we were able to trap one of the offspring from that. It was a male, and we put a band on that. That's the work up there. And you know, ideally we would, and I'll explain this a little bit, maybe in this next slide. Will be the next one, but ideally we try to get the young before they leave the nest and get bands on them because it's much easier. But we were fooled by this nest. It was a very strange reproductive cycle last night. We have some theory, or last year, we have some theories as to why, but it seemed pretty late. So the successful nest, the you know, June 28th was when we estimated that they had fledged. Several of the boxes that we put up too, I should point out, were occupied by European starling. And that is going to be an ongoing problem. It's a problem for other people, researchers and volunteers working in the program. Starlings love these boxes too. So we really need to be more vigilant moving forward to try to prevent them from getting in their nesting, because we know that if there is a nest in there, it probably would be avoided by a kestrel exploring, looking for a nest box. We did have one box occupied by eastern fox squirrel. That was right on the edge of town where met the urban tree canopy. We haven't seen that issue out with the ones that don't have fox squirrels on site, obviously, but squirrels do like those boxes as well. And 5 of the boxes were just never used by anything, with the exception of maybe paper wasps. But that's another thing that you have to kind of be careful of. So lessons learned. What did we learn so far? Is that we need to get out there earlier in the season and chase those starlings out, because they will thwart the efforts of those kestrels to use those boxes for successful reproduction. More diligent monitoring of the incubation, staging. We got equipment now. We have a really cool camera that mounts to a pole we can put up there and look on our phone and see what's going on. It's quick, easy, great imaging. So we're better prepared to make better estimations of where they're at in their incubation cycle, so we can get out there and get the babies before they leave the nest. Also, we're dialing in our locations. We're learning that, you know, certain areas, those 5 boxes that weren't used, we might try to better position those to mimic where we did see the occupancy. Wasps, yeah, I mentioned that before. Yep, they're out there, especially in the summer. They're quite aggressive during that time. And we probably need to do more maintenance on them. We don't know if they're a problem for the kestrels. We don't know if they're prohibiting kestrels from using these boxes. That's another research question. And then it's also important to provision these boxes. So provisioning is essentially making sure they're clean of any previous activity, clean of any wasp nest, starling nest, but have fresh chips in there, removing the old material, reseeding it so that, you know, parasite loading and these sorts of things don't become an issue for the next cycle. So all the boxes we have up right now are ready to go. They're all set up. And I think this is, we were jumping off. So Kevin's going to come up and give you guys the rest of the spiel.
Thanks, John.
Ken, thanks for pulling this together. You did it. Zoom works. Appreciate it. Thanks for having us. Appreciate that. John talked about last year's project. I'm going to talk a little bit about the American Kestrel Partnership and kind of the research and management effort that's underway nationwide, really continent-wide, to support kestrels. This American Kestrel Partnership started about 10 years ago, 12 years ago now, by the Peregrine Fund, which is a nonprofit that was set up to recover peregrine falcons. And it was created in response to this chronic kestrel population decline that you saw on the map. It's comprised of a network of professional and community scientists and kestrel enthusiasts like me. It's international in scope, but mainly North American. And the mission is to advance the understanding of kestrel demographics and promote conservation. So my role, my career is with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. I retired a few years ago, and I love kestrels, always have. And they let me continue standing in one of the staff person's shoes to monitor this program and report back to the department. So that's my role is I participate thoroughly with the partnership and then report back to the department, but it also helps me with the nest box program. Lots of nest boxes up and running. The partnership, it does many things, but one of the things that it does well is established kind of a clearinghouse for monitoring of these nest boxes. The data are managed by the partnership staff. And as John mentioned, they help inform conservation actions and support research. So you can see that the 2023 season had the most participation, 200 partners, 7,000, almost 7,500 observations and 1,600 boxes. So it's really kind of taken off. And you can see the graphs there. It's still growing every year. So I wanted to drill down just a little bit on California. Every one of those green flags is a Kestrel box project. So it's not a box, it's a project. So some of them have 20 boxes, 30, 40, some 50. There's some like ours, just 10. So you can see there's a lot of projects going on in California. And you might notice they're centered around the urban areas, easy to get to. People already live there. And there's quite a few in our general area. There aren't any in the city of Davis, but there have been projects in Yellow and Solano counties. 2018 and 2019, UC Davis put up 90 boxes in Solano and Yolo County. And Dr. Hull, who was kind of running that project, he published a paper in June about, and he had so many problems with starlings, he ended up entitled in the paper, How to Manage Starlings in Nest Boxes, rather than the production he got out of the boxes for kestrels. It's just it's a huge, huge issue nationwide. So just going to highlight a couple of projects. This one in grasslands in the UC Reserve in Merced County, grasslands and vernal pool complex has been up and going for a while. You can see I circled a couple of numbers here. They had about 70, I think they put up about 70 boxes, and this is the last year's data I could get. I think they're still going. I don't know, Julie, do you know if they're still going? But you can see they had about 65% of the boxes occupied over time over that 3-year period. 26 successful nests out of their 70 boxes, so about 25% were successful. Very high fledgling rate, they had 82% fledgling rate, and they banded almost 100 nestlings out of this one project. So these are, they're really, these projects really do make a serious contribution to conservation. I'll get to some of the research that's going on here in just a minute, but the nationwide partnership is relying on a lot of these data to kind of develop hypotheses and management actions for kestrels. I love this picture. I didn't know they could take king snakes, but apparently they can. So this is another Contra Costa County project, and they had very similar rates, about overall occupancy about 73%. They probably have 15 boxes out there, and all of theirs are in a oak woodland matrix, not associated directly with ag. I think it's important to note on both of these projects, the first year is always a low occupancy. And looking back on our effort, March was probably a little late to get those boxes up last year. We probably should have had them up in February, maybe early February, late January. We'll see this year now that they've been up year round, but it's hard to say. You saw this map earlier. So, red is decline, yellow is not enough data to develop a trend, but probably declining, and then green is increasing. So most of the BBS routes describe a 60 to 70% decline on many of the routes. So a few years ago, the partnership developed this research collaborative, and it consists of a couple of really experts on raptors and kestrels from ideally from each of the states. There's usually 20, 25 participants, but these are the top raptor researchers in those states. And the idea was using a structured decision-making process to come up with ideas on why these things are declining. There's no obvious reason, no reason that presents itself as a single reason. So, and that's going on right now. This next year, I think this year, 2024, I think we'll see some publications out on what's, with their results. That's the group I'm participating with. So that it's obvious from my participation in this that, these the decline factors, they vary by the region of the country, of the continent. They're complex and interrelated. It's not one thing, it's something that's exacerbated by something else. The relative contribution of these factors is largely unknown. In other words, is predation by cats, a larger hit than predation by Cooper's hawks or road mortality? Those things are really not known. Everybody agrees there's no silver bullet. It's a combination of a lot of factors. So these are I'm just going to touch on a few of these. These are ones that group has agreed are worth exploring as kind of main factors. Agricultural chemicals, John covered that, pesticides, rodenticides, herbicides, directly and indirectly impact kestrels, no question about that. Insect-friendly management, and this came from kind of the Midwest, managing areas, not just for big game or other species, but to promote insects that are potential prey for kestrels and others. Avian predators, I think it's really interesting that, the Cooper's hawks are implicated in this decline to some degree. Most of the group feel that that's really a bigger impact back east, although in our project, when we were out banding, we had a Cooper's hawk try to take out one of the young that had just fledged. So they're definitely out there. And one of the researchers from back east said that this running a nest box program said that the Cooper's hawks visit those nest boxes every day, waiting for the young to fledge. So it's certainly a factor. They figured this out. But out here, there's some argue corvids are a bigger impact as far as predation than Cooper's hawks. Road mortality, the big concern here is nest box placement close to roads, with 1,700 nest boxes out there, and a lot of these data that are driving these management actions coming from the nest boxes. Are we really setting up, sinks for these birds? They fledge, the young are inexperienced, and they get hit by cars going after prey on the roads. So it's, one consideration is having some standards especially for nest box placement, not near roads. Ours are generally away from well-traveled roads, with maybe one exception. Nest cavity type, they take readily to these nest boxes. We had 2 different designs for our opening, but there's still some discussion about whether it's better to rely more on habitat restoration and natural cavities than it is to rely on nest boxes. So that's something that the group's considering. There's, especially in the Great Basin game bird management, they're trying to influence people to get away from single species management, manage for raptors as well as game birds. Lethal take, there's still a lot of persecution of kestrels in the US, and a lot in Mexico and South America, and enough so that some feel this is a significant factor. It's kind of hard to imagine that's still a problem. Cats, I don't probably need to say more on that. Public outreach and awareness, we're here tonight, but it's, getting the public aware of kestrel decline and what they can do. The starling nest competition is definitely an impact. Crop choice and insects. I mean, for example, in this part of California, I know with the department, we routinely would prescribe Swainson's hawk mitigation that included a specific crop type that Swainson's hawks were known to use. So, there may be something on easements using crops that benefit kestrels, for example. Winter roosts, probably not a huge issue out here, but back east, it's a big deal. Make these boxes so they can also protect from the cold, shelter from the cold in the winter, not just nested in the summer. And then this idea of baseline, especially from the Rockies east, kind of pre-settlement, that was all wooded. Then it got cleared for agriculture, and some are arguing there were never many kestrels in that part of the United States until that land was gone. Now, natural succession, habitat restoration, forest restoration may be contributing to decline, but maybe that's just going back down to what they were in that part of the country. So these are all ideas that they're wrestling with, and later this year we'll have a sense of what they feel are the most important ones. So looking ahead, Journal of Raptor Research, I'm sure many of you are familiar with that journal. It's the premier kind of raptor research journal, and they've already committed to at least 2, maybe 3, full issues to kestrel declines. Julie Yamamoto is it. I want to introduce her. She's an expert on kestrels. So when I saw her here, I was like, I hope I don't make any mistakes. But at least 2, maybe 3 full issues have been devoted to kestrel research, and another one will be this year. So it's really kind of up topmost in the research world. And then management focus, hopefully some of this translates into public land management and private land management and mitigation land management. And then public and landowner, land manager awareness, I think will be a huge factor when it comes time to implement some of these management strategies. I think it's it. Yeah, that's all we have. So is there questions, discussion?
I was wondering about if there's any research about wondering where they're increasing. Why they're increasing.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. In here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the question was, are the reasons why they're increasing in areas where they are increasing known? And yeah, I don't know. There were a few spots where and those are long-term trends. So it's, it's not a anomaly of some kind. That's a trend. So yeah.
Just an observation from another part of the country. About 15 years ago, I lived in northern Florida and was part of the Alachua Audubon Society in the Gainesville area. And in conjunction with the Boy Scouts there was an Eagle Scout that made 100 Kestrel boxes for the Audubon Society there with one of their wildlife biologists. And they actually made a partnership with their equivalent of PG&E and got buy-in from the power company to allow placement of the boxes on the utility
Oh, really?
poles. And I know you don't want them near roads, but there are utility poles away from busy.
There are. A couple of our boxes are on those, but we just use abandoned poles, but that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, I don't know what PG&E's temperature would be on that, but the local one in Florida was supportive, and we had very good occupancy, similar to what you quoted from the other projects that have been going a little bit longer. I don't know why we didn't have much problems with Kestrel or with the starlings at the time. We had mostly Kestrels if they were in them, but sometimes we had screech owls and sometimes we had flying squirrels.
Oh, yeah, it's I was talking earlier at the base of that occupied nest box, we found a dead starling, and I know there's accounts in the literature of these guys, the kestrels, once they've established a nest in the box, they'll defend it, kind of to the death. So, but it's the other boxes were just completely taken over by them. It's just kind of crazy. Yeah, the project I mentioned by Dr. Holland Davis in 2018 and 2019 in Yolo and Solano County. Yeah, he said he had Boy Scout troops, Girl Scout troops. He got them all made. We were toiling away in the garage, and that paper came out in June. I'm like, what are you doing?
Well, there's actually a community member who just donated 3 of them to the program. This is one of them. So we are beginning to build our network, through the outreach and education. So.
Are you also reaching out to landowners and farmers about putting boxes in their property?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's going to be 2024. If we can get our act together, we're going to put some more boxes up, some of these donated ones. And so we're looking further outside the scope of just city fee-title properties to where we might have an easement, or like the Yolo Habitat Conservancy and Yolo Land Trust. So we've reached out to those organizations and you know, even before we reached out to them, we were out driving around looking at them, like making a wish list, like, oh, this is good. And then, you know, we made that up and we refined those and we came up with some, prime spots that we thought would be good candidate sites for the next waves of boxes. And so we reached out to the land management agencies and they got us in contact with the landowners. And, you know, after a little bit of communication with the landowner, to explain to them, we're not coming in to mess up your operation. You know, we want to sneak in and decide, we want to put these up, here's why we're doing it. And we had that communication with them, you know, they're like, this is great, yeah, come put a box up. Well, you know, and then they, you know, they're gonna notify their farmer tenants, so they have people who manage the land, and they're like, if you want, we can get them to make observation of the boxes and report them too. And I'm thinking, why not? You know, you got a guy out there on a tractor, you know, there all day watching this box. He might be able to, they may be able to come up with some really good observations to share with us, right? Because we can't be there all day. So, yes.
Where does one get the proper design for the box?
If you want, I don't know, I can send the link to the American Kestrel Partnership's got the design on their website. I can send a link to Ken. Can you send it out if I do that, Ken, or?
Yes.
Okay, I'll send the link to Ken.
If someone online has a question.
Hold on there.
Oh,
Oh,
this is
actually,
new boxes.
yeah, go
You
ahead.
mentioned, that there was one better design over another, and could you elaborate on that? Or I thought you had said something about that.
So, yeah, when I was talking earlier, I mean, we made one design, so we made this design here. And then we bought a separate design that is in use. And we think, because we personally haven't tested the two boxes, but we believe this design, American Kestrel Partnership design, to be superior because of the side opening design, but also this little lip. If you guys can't see what's going on, there's this thing down here, and this Kevin's been up many a ladder, navigating, you know, trying to make sure, you know, the young don't come tumbling out of there when he's reaching in to try to get in the pan. And to have the face open up and just the bottom, that's like a straight shot for anybody to come bombing out of. Here, at least he's got a fighting chance where you can get a hand up in there. And this little thing will act as like a barrier or a backstop, and they'll go to the back of the box and then you can collect them out. So it's, you know, Kevin's opinion, and I certainly agree with it, that this is probably gonna be a better design for facilitating the collection of samples out of the box. The other one, you know, if they become occupied and they're having babies in there, that's certainly great. And if they're successful, that's great. It just make it a little tougher to sneak in there.
This part of the world, I mean, it was kind of a strange year last year. We had nice weather all the way till the end of June, but you know, if they have a late season and it's hot too, that'll be another test of these boxes. You see these have the whole, on both sides, the top is open. So it's vented up there. And, you know, that one's not, yeah.
But
And the
they
bottoms
have-
are, but one of them, I forget which one is vented better than the other, so we'll see if that makes a difference. Ken?
I've got some comments on the Zoom crowd.
Sure.
First one, here's just a comment. There's a participant out there that says that SMUT might be more on board with this if PG&E is starting to whatever. And I think you're interested that the person has contact, so.
Okay, that's great.
Maybe
Yeah,
today
thanks.
together.
Appreciate that.
This looks like another statement. Person says, Ken says, not this one. I have been hosting a Kestrel box near Lake Solano for several years now and support the observation that corvids, especially ravens, are quite a problem. Their numbers are going up a lot. I guess that means ravens. We lost a brood 3 years ago to the ravens, and the next year put in a taller box, and it's okay since.
Yeah, that's, I think the general consensus is out west, it's corvids, and back east, it's Cooper socks, although several things.
Ken adds that his taller box was 4 inches taller than the web designs we saw.
Oh,
This particular design is a pretty deep set compared to the other ones that we've seen. And the other modification, which is kind of new, I think it's becoming more widely adopted, is how the opening is shaped. Most of the older designs, it's just round. It's a round hole of a certain size, like 3 inches diameter or something like that. But the newer design that they've been testing out and finding has value is more of an oval. And the concept behind that was that they were seeing some larger prey items being restricted for delivery. So, you know, the parents would bring in, maybe they stored a rat or something, and they're trying to jam it in there and it's not going in. So they thought, well, if we modify this, it'll allow or lend easier delivery of prey items. It's another thing we would love to try to record and document, maybe get some little cameras inside these boxes just to watch what's being delivered, what they're consuming. The great picture that Kevin had up in there from one of the projects down by Mount Diablo, I think.
Yeah.
You know, had that California king snake in there. And I can just imagine them trying to feed that thing, and you know, maybe a couple of hungry babies will just snag it and drag it in. But yeah, having a bigger hole like that apparently is going to be a greater benefit to for creative.
Is there anything else? Question over there.
Do you paint those things, Vanderroel, when he did his Martin box, found out that painting them white and putting a double roof on them, provide, cool them off, both of those things with his Martin boxes, and I think that is something in this area is a good thing to do, is to try, at least paint them white,
Yeah.
or the roof's white.
Yeah, so that, you know, again, that's another thing that we are certainly eyes wide open about, especially with the environmental, you know, the climate shifting, the warmer, more extreme weather events that we're having. You know, just as a personal observation with the barn owl nest box program here in town is that we are seeing a higher occurrence of evacuation, if you will, of young owls out of the boxes during hot days. And so we are suspecting that is a heat related thing, especially when the sun's hitting them directly. The design difference is moving forward is what you've suggested, which is like an air gap or a heat shield, if you will, around the box. The gentleman who donated this box also donated one that has his version of the heat shield built onto him. So we were again interested in, you know, recording more of the you know, what sort of impacts do temperatures have on these birds. The literature right now isn't really saying anything, like it's not an issue. But it could be moving forward, especially in the Central Valley when we see those really hot days.
I'm on the board out of the Cache Creek Nature Preserve, and we have a lot of tree swallow boxes up, and our data up there suggests that the heat, when we've had some hot spells during the summer, those particular broods have had a higher fledgling mortality, and so we suspect that as well. And the biologist out there this year has done exactly what was suggested for this year's paint the tops of the boxes with some
That's
reflective.
interesting.
Do you know, did they put data loggers in there at all to monitor temperatures and?
No, that's a really good suggestion. No, they were just monitoring the survivability of occupancy and survivability of the.
And there's a correlation there, so there's obviously something going on.
Yeah, anecdotally, they did feel like the ones that were more exposed had the higher mortality.
I mean, that, you know, if you look at the literature, the east northeast facing opening, I mean, the idea partly for that was the morning sun in cold climes, but also that puts the back of the box and presumably the pole in the west here where you have the, you know, kind of the hotter afternoon sun. So I mean, I think we get some benefit from that, but painting, I haven't seen anything lit about painting, but that's not a bad idea. Ken?
I have a Zoom question. Is there anything distinctive about the location of this successful nest box?
It was the worst habitat of all the boxes. I mean, literally.
Yeah, it was, we put that box up and kind of laughed like, there's no way. This one won't be occupied, you know, and then it was the only one that was occupied.
But I guess the one thing I will say is that just because of the way it's disturbed lands, but near the box and behind the box, it ended up being like a small wetland that had a lot of amphibs
Yeah.
and late into the year too.
Yeah.
And so that might be something, a lot more insects. It was a wetland in July. It's still wet. So it's just because of the way it was, road, embankments and things like that just happened to be in that near the box. I don't know if that's a factor or
Well,
it was so late too. It could have been a second nesting
Yeah.
effort too.
yeah, that's true.
And that was like, luckily we found the box in April and then they just used it. It's hard to say. But the habitat was very poor in the surrounding areas. It's hard to go figure.
Well, another thing about that site that it just in our memory right now, without having, going back and revisiting those other sites to take measurements, and really kind of assess what's going on, was the availability of perch sites in the vicinity of the box. This particular one had tons. I mean, fences, the old digester from the treatment plant, which was, maybe, I don't know, like 5 meters away, and right at eye level to where the box opening was. I mean, that's if you're a parent who wants to have, good observation of what's going on out there when you're out foraging and stuff. This was a good site for that too.
And the adults were using all those perches.
All those perches.
So that's true. That was unique about that site.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there some place we can report data on these birds that other than eBird that you guys are the people you work with would find it more?
Well, they use the eBird data, so I would just suggest,
Okay,
yeah,
so just keep it up.
yeah.
What is the population estimate of kestrels in this area that you're putting the box in?
Got me, I don't know. I mean, there's some resident birds that, one big question that I think it's an important research question. They're starting to answer it back east, but we're not out here, is what part of the population out here is year round and what part is migratory? Obviously, there's clearly birds coming in the winter, but I think there's also pairs that stay here year round. So I think it's tough to say what the population would be. I mean, looking at that, you saw the plots of the eBird data for the last 10 years during the breeding season. You look at that and you can start to see little nodes of where there probably were nests. So I would say there's fewer than 10 in the greater Davis area, 10 nested pairs in any one year. Hard to say.
Did you have a question? You were kind of, okay.
Julie, did you have a question?
Oh, I was thinking about the box construction. Have you tried to put the top? And how was that top hinge?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't have any, I did several nest box projects, monitoring and banding with the department. And we had one set that were, top open ones, and I mean, they seem to be okay. You need a much taller ladder. You'd be surprised how much more you need just to get in, because you have to be up over the top of it to look in. Whereas the side one, you can be down below the box and still, so, I mean, you need feet more, and that's a factor when you're hauling a ladder a mile.
Well, we're not getting any younger.
And I know I'm not getting aggressive.
It looks like a pretty far away. When I was young, it wasn't that far off the ground. It's like,
And you gotta get, I mean, I think all of ours, maybe one exception, they're over 10 feet up. And so you're looking at another couple of feet if you want to be able to see in there.
we
Or you
are.
can scope it, I guess. Yeah.
We are contemplating, there's people back east that are using poles, standalone poles, so areas where we don't have trees or anything to fashion to, we're gonna need to put in a pole. But this design that they use is it's a hinge at the bottom, so they set up about 16 feet or so, and they're hinged at the bottom, so you can pull a pin and then lean them down. But you think, oh, that's dangerous if you got a box full of chicks, right? You're just gonna dump them out at the end. But the way that the box attaches to the top of that pole then also hinges. So the whole thing comes down as one. So then we can be on the ground. I can send the box down to Kevin, and Kevin can get right in there. Fish these out, ban them up to where they do. So we're gonna be testing that out hopefully this year.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. On one of those ag properties out there. Actually, two of them.
Okay, another question from Zoom, but Could you guys please, I forgot to ask you this earlier. When the question from the audience here, could you repeat the question?
Oh, you did ask. Sorry about that. Sure.
I'm sorry, I didn't mention that earlier. Okay, so question, are there any plans to put Lotus GPS on local kestrel to see how many migrate and to where?
So the question was, are there plans to use the Modus network to put trackers on some of these nestlings and use the Modus network to see how they're moving? Yeah, yes. We were just talking about this today, and it's, you know, there's only one kestrel that's tracked in California with a Modus tracker right now. They're tracked very well east of the Rockies. A lot of people have really bought into this. So I think it's right if we could get 20 trackers, if the Department of Fish and Wildlife would be generous enough to buy 20 trackers, and we coordinate with the other best box projects, I think we can really do some good by getting some of these chicks with the Modus trackers on there and see and start to see what they're doing in California. Whether they're staying or leaving and where they're going. So.
Is everybody familiar with the Modus network? No. So it's infrastructure that was put in, I want to say by the
Canada came up with
Canada.
it. Yeah.
It was Canada. So they're basically a network of receivers, and I think satellite receivers, and I think they're co-located to like cell communication towers and stuff, but they're spread throughout
the department's got, you might know, maybe a dozen, maybe 15 up and down the valley on their wildlife areas.
And
They're
growing.
in the Yolo Bypass Wildlife Area north of the Causeway.
Right. So these are just basically, if you envision it's like a receiving antenna, and then you put a transmitter on the bird, which is very small. Don't know how long they live because they're so small. The energetics is maybe they'll last a couple of months of data before you got to refresh them. I'm not 100%.
Well, they're going to bolt out anyway.
But when they move near that transponder, it grabs it and says, "Oh, this bird was here on this day." And that's about the only data that they get. But the more of those they hit, they can pick up movement, but also estimate speed if they're really hitting the like how fast it's migrating, how fast it's moving. So there's data, a lot of really valuable data. Probably most important is where they're going, how far they're going before they turn around and return.
I'd mentioned that Levi Sousa gave us a talk on that.
On Modus?
Sometime last year, not here on the television, but
They're cool.
he did a very good job of doing that. And he's running a lot of the core calculus he gave.
Oh, nice.
Now, and establishing this post.
I mean, this transmitters now, I think that's one thing that makes this such a usable technology now for tracking birds. I mean, there's some of those transmitters so far, you know, about dragonflies.
Yeah.
I think you can put them on monarchs, right?
Mm.
So you can put them on monarch butterflies. Back in that one, yeah.
Thanks for that tip though, because I'm definitely going to reach out to Levi, see if he can hook us up.
I'll just add the 2.5 grams that we get for kestrels are advertised to last for 5 years.
5 years.
Really?
That's great.
That's great.
Completely tested, but that's what they say.
Nice.
It's good. That's good to know. Wow, we can get
Yeah.
quite around. But I think you're right. Won't they molt off because you glue them?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Seems like they would. They go on the tail feathers, so.
We
Seems like
use
they
a
would.
backpack harness or a regular harness.
Oh, okay. All right, great.
Any other questions?
Food source, you mentioned insects as a food source, what percentage of their food is insects?
Yeah, so the question was, what percentage of their food intake is insects? I don't know offhand. I would say it varies by the time of year, for sure. Probably at least half, I would say. Julie, would you say it's about right? At least half, yeah. But it depends on the time of year. I think they're in the early breeding season, they're probably maybe taking in more insects, and they provision the young with insects.
Yeah.
So
Well,
maybe more during that time of year, I don't know.
An example of another small raptor would be like the burrowing owl, and they certainly switch to high protein insect diets right when they're when the chicks are hatching out. and that's pretty much their focus, and you can look at the pellets to do the analysis. In the wintertime, they switch more to mammals and even birds, small birds. I understand, in this area, yellow-rumped warblers tend to be a pretty good target one.
Have you been following the decline of insects worldwide?
Much as I can, yeah, it's really happening.
We live a lot of the time in the Midwest, and there's dramatic. It's phenomenally decreased. You used to see clouds of insects around light fixtures. We're not turning them at all. I think it's gonna have a huge ramification.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's one of the factors that ends up being an important one for a lot of these smaller, like Berwyn owls and kestrels, you know.
I think even the mice and rats and rodents,
Yeah, the whole trip of disturbed.
all food chain.
Yeah. Are you interested in any volunteer help or funding?
The question was, are we interested in any volunteer help or funding? And yes. We need help monitoring these things. Yeah, Kevin and I, we try to get out there as much as we can, but we can't. Yeah, ideally, we would love to have eyes on these things probably daily, especially right around.
Certainly at least weekly,
Yeah.
if not more during the critical time of the year when starlings are, so, yeah.
Monitoring for starlings, and if there's starlings, you can, drop us an email and say, you got starlings at box 11 or whatever, and we'll go out and deal with those. The funding part of it, at the moment, we have a fair amount of boxes, but we could always use more. So if you wanted to donate boxes, we could always find spots to put them up. Of course, more boxes go up, more volunteers we need to watch them. And then, the city has a small budget for some of the properties we have, but if we start getting too far out of our zone of influence, then it's harder for me to justify spending money for that. But like I was mentioning before, we are interested in that cantilever design for freestanding pole, and that's lumber and hardware. We haven't priced it out, but my guess is it's going to be, $600-700 in lumber and hardware to go put up a few of those things. And I mean, if you're interested in making one or donating materials for that, we can certainly, we're not going to turn you down.
And is there a contact number or email you?
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll send that around with the plans and through Ken. So you have it, so everybody's got it.
And you're always welcome to contact me through the City of Davis. If you just go City of Davis Wildlife, my contact info will be there, my email address and cell phone, I think, it's all there. So feel free anytime to reach out.
So I think, the idea here is to support research as much as we're supporting the local population. And as such, we don't want to move these boxes around. We moved quite a few this time, but the idea is to leave them there because negative data is just as important as positive data. So we're kind of fixed. I don't see us maybe doing more than 20 across the landscape. That's enough, even for, for us that are enthusiastic about this.
And we have 14 boxes?
Yeah.
Not up yet, but
we will by hopefully soon.
But yeah.
But I mean, and then just let it go, let it run, and we'll just monitor them over time, replace them if they get broken or whatever. But I can't imagine having 80 or 90 boxes up. I mean, he's lucky he had indentured students,
Yeah.
Dr. Hall, to do all this stuff, and we don't. So.
A lot of work.
I just mentioned a couple of comments from the zone for the benefit of the audience here. One person wrote that bats are being tagged with Modus trackers, and the
Yes.
findings are amazing. And another participant said that his kestrels in Oak Savannas are feeding their young majority of lizards.
Interesting.
Probably not an alligator lizard because they're pretty ferocious. Anyway, this one. Okay, any other questions?
Well, thanks,
Thanks,
y'all.
guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah.